Take a moment right now to genuinely slow down. Just breathe. Set aside the constant stream of thoughts running through your mind for a little while and allow your attention to move gently inward toward what you have actually been sensing underneath everything else that has been happening in your daily life. Something has been making itself known to you recently, and it is difficult to describe with ordinary words. There is a tightness that appears in your chest without any warning at all. A memory of a specific person surfaces in your mind suddenly and without invitation. There is a quiet, almost electric restlessness that moves just beneath the surface of your normal routine, present enough to feel, but not quite visible enough to explain. That feeling is not random, and it is not something your imagination has manufactured out of longing. It is a signal, something real. Energy is genuinely moving towards you right now, and the deeper part of you is already aware of it, even before your thinking mind has found the words to understand what is happening. Your inner self operates on a level that exists far below conversation and rational thinking. It picks up information and movement that travels faster than anything occurring in the visible outer world. This is why you can feel that something is shifting with this particular person before any clear external signs have shown themselves. That gentle pull in your chest, the one you have likely been dismissing as wishful thinking or the echo of old attachment, is actually your inner awareness communicating something important. It is letting you know that this connection still holds experiences within it that have not fully arrived yet. If you have felt that sudden pressure in your chest, or a strong sense of being pulled towards someone recently, do not move past it. Sit with it for a moment. This is often how these things begin to show themselves. Just before something changes in the physical world, a quiet inner pressure begins building first. It is an energetic tension that can be sensed but not easily explained. That is precisely where you find yourself right now. Small openings are beginning to form in what once felt like solid and permanent silence. New pathways are appearing in places where emotional walls once seemed completely immovable. Your presence in this person's life has not disappeared the way you may have feared it had. While you have been navigating your own inner world and living through periods of uncertainty, something has been shifting within them as well. The emotional barriers they constructed around themselves out of fear and pride and the need for control have been slowly, quietly beginning to give way. The intensity you have been sensing is there because this person is now carrying emotions they can no longer fully keep down. The truth that has been living inside them is rising to the surface whether or not they feel prepared for it. The connection you share operates on a level that goes deeper than ordinary understanding. It is not something that time or physical distance can simply dissolve. To genuinely understand why this change is happening right now and why the days ahead may feel different in quality than what came before, it helps to look more closely at what this person has been moving through in the silence between you. During the space that opened up, they were navigating carefully, keeping their distance on the surface while still watching from a distance. They were caught between their own fears and a pull toward you that they worked hard to deny and dismiss. They stayed occupied with the normal rhythms of daily life. From the outside, they appeared calm and composed, as though they had genuinely moved on and established a comfortable new routine. But that appearance was only a surface layer. It was a mask they were wearing even for themselves, a way of convincing their own mind that stepping back had been the right and rational choice. As time continued to pass, that mask became heavier to carry. Beneath it, a quiet internal struggle went on that no one else could observe or know about. Night after night, they wrestled with their own emotions. They applied logic to justify the distance and told themselves it was the safer path forward. Some of that came from pride, some came from fear, and some came from genuinely not knowing how to handle feelings that had grown too large and too specific to manage comfortably. This experience is more common than most people ever acknowledge. Sometimes people create distance not because they feel nothing, but because they feel far too much. Being genuinely seen by another person can feel completely overwhelming. It can stir fears of losing control or of being hurt in ways that feel familiar from the past. But when a connection carries real depth and genuine meaning at a level beneath the surface, rational thinking eventually loses its ability to override what the heart knows. Over time, the walls this person had built began to weaken from within. And as that happened, they started noticing that life felt less vivid, less complete, without you in it. Something important was missing even when they could not identify it precisely. A new and uncomfortable awareness began developing inside them. They started to see that the carefully controlled version of themselves they had been presenting to the world was not the real thing. It was a role they had taken on, and it had stopped feeling natural. Every effort they made to move further away was quietly interrupted by thoughts that kept returning to you, not simply missing you in the ordinary way people miss a pleasant habit or a comfortable presence. Something deeper connected to their sense of self. This became a turning point of sorts, a kind of inner awakening they had not chosen or anticipated. At times, they tried to manage these feelings by surrounding themselves with activity and noise and other people. But even in those moments, the thoughts kept surfacing. Quiet comparisons appeared in their mind that they would never have spoken out loud, but that kept leading back to you. All of this was accumulating steadily beneath the surface and slowly forming the shift you are now beginning to sense. The usual distractions are no longer working the way they once did. A person can only push their emotions aside for so long before the inner self becomes genuinely exhausted from the effort of it. That is exactly where this person has arrived. The life they built to avoid feeling what they actually feel no longer provides the same numb comfort it once offered. They once believed that space would weaken the bond between you, that silence would gradually reduce the intensity of what they carried, that enough time would eventually dissolve your presence from their emotional world. But the opposite has occurred. The more time passed, the clearer their feelings became. Rather than fading, you became more present in their thoughts. They began noticing you in the quiet moments, in the empty pauses just before sleep, in conversations that suddenly felt incomplete and slightly hollow in ways they could not explain to anyone else. Even in environments full of noise and activity, their mind still found its way back to you. This is where a deeper realization began quietly taking root. They started to understand that what existed between you was not ordinary or temporary. It touched parts of them that no one else had ever reached. Once that understanding fully formed, it changed how they saw everything connected to it. Because once someone genuinely understands that a connection carries real meaning, they cannot return to treating it as something insignificant. Their mind may attempt to resist, but their emotional truth speaks considerably louder than that resistance. There have been nights where they sat alone, remembering specific conversations that may have faded somewhat from your own memory, but still live with full clarity in theirs. Small moments that once seemed unremarkable have grown into something deeply significant in retrospect. The way you looked at them during difficult moments, the particular calm your presence created without any visible effort on your part, the relief of being with someone they did not have to perform for or carefully manage their words around. That kind of emotional safety is genuinely rare in this world. The emptiness it leaves behind when it is gone cannot easily be filled by something else. They have tried. It has not worked. The more they looked elsewhere for that same quality of feeling, the more clearly they understood what they had lost. At first, pride told them they would move on easily, that they were stronger than what they felt. But pride always meets its limit, eventually. It always encounters the weight of emotional truth. And for this person, that meeting has arrived. They now see the connection between you in a fundamentally different light. It is no longer something they can choose to set aside or replace at will. They are beginning to understand that encountering you changed something within them in a way that is not undoable. While all of this has been unfolding inside them, something has also been shifting within you. Even if you still think about them and hold genuine questions about what might still happen, you are no longer occupying the same emotional space you once were. Something inside you has grown steadier and more grounded. You have learned from direct experience what it feels like to keep reaching towards someone who is not meeting you halfway. You felt the specific weight of carrying too much emotional effort entirely on your own. And gradually, through the silence and confusion, you started drawing your energy back toward yourself. That change is deeply significant even when it feels quiet and subtle from the inside. When you stopped overextending yourself and stopped waiting in the way you once did, the entire energetic quality of the connection shifted. There was a time when your attention was almost entirely directed outward, and your mood rose and fell in direct response to their presence or absence, their reactions or their silence. But eventually you grew tired of that particular pattern, not with drama or bitterness, but with a quiet recognition that your own peace deserves to be honored. You gradually brought your energy back toward yourself, not because you stopped caring, but because you began caring for yourself more genuinely than you had before. That single internal shift created a change that rippled outward in ways you may not have fully recognized at the time. When someone consistently directs all of their emotional attention outward, their presence can begin to feel taken for granted to the person receiving it. But when that outward energy returns inward and becomes calm and self-contained, its absence becomes deeply noticeable. That is what this person is experiencing right now. They are feeling your distance differently than before because your energy no longer reaches them in the same way it once did. Rather than weakening the connection, it has forced them into a more honest confrontation with what they have been avoiding. This is why they have become more restless. Some part of them senses that you are changing in a genuine and significant way. The version of you that waited patiently, that tried consistently, that made yourself smaller in hope of making things work, is no longer the same. And that realization creates urgency because time suddenly feels less limitless and less forgiving than it once seemed. People very often cannot see the true value of something while they are still in comfortable possession of it. This person is now sitting quietly with the full weight of every moment they let pass without acting, every feeling they pushed away, every time fear guided their choices instead of honesty. For the first time, they cannot easily escape that truth or redirect their attention away from it. Separation does not always destroy a bond. Sometimes it clarifies it in a way that nothing else could. Distance has a way of exposing emotional patterns that cannot simply be glossed over or ignored when someone is forced to sit with them. It reveals where fear has been operating inside a person. It exposes where someone has been slowly losing themselves in the pursuit of connection. It makes visible what each person becomes when they are left completely alone with their own unfiltered thoughts. This period apart has changed both of you, but in genuinely different ways. For you, it became an opportunity to rediscover your own worth and your own center without needing their recognition to confirm it. For them, it became the lived experience of moving through daily life without your presence and without the particular kind of emotional energy you naturally carry. That is why what you are sensing right now carries such depth and meaning. Things that were buried under layers of avoidance are beginning to rise. This person is starting to understand that what they miss is not simply your attention or your availability. They miss your energy itself, your emotional depth, the specific way they felt when they were genuinely in your presence. They miss the experience of being truly understood without having to break themselves down into explanations first. That particular realization has grown strong enough that they can no longer push it aside with their usual ease. What they are experiencing now is not a passing mood or a difficult week. It has become something consistent and present, something that moves through their daily experience whether they invite it or not. There are ordinary moments when they are absorbed in some completely unremarkable task and a memory of you takes over their full attention without warning. A certain sound, a specific scent, a particular word, even a time of day, begins carrying traces of your presence within it. In the beginning, these moments made them uncomfortable because they wanted to believe they had complete control over their inner world. They wanted to decide when you could enter their thoughts and when you could not. But genuine emotional truth does not operate according to anyone's sense of control. The stronger the bond between two people, the more naturally it rises on its own terms. They are approaching a point now where resisting the connection requires more energy than simply allowing themselves to feel it. The walls they constructed for self-protection are starting to function more like isolation than like genuine safety. The silence they believed they needed has become heavy and uncomfortable, pushing them toward deeper reflection rather than offering the relief they expected from it. From that place of accumulated silence and reflection, they are revisiting the past with eyes that finally see it differently. They remember specific moments when you extended genuine effort to understand them while they stayed closed off. They recall your patience, the emotional presence you offered, the depth of care you brought to the connection that they largely overlooked at the time. Those memories now carry an entirely different meaning because they can finally recognize clearly what was actually being offered to them. Real love often seems ordinary and unremarkable when it is present consistently every day. Its true depth becomes visible only when it is no longer there. They are only now beginning to understand how genuinely rare what you gave them was. The honesty, the emotional depth, the steadiness, the particular freedom of being with someone who created space for them to simply exist as themselves without pressure or performance. They have looked for that same quality of feeling in other directions and found nothing that even approaches it. That only makes your significance grow more undeniable within them. There were nights when they tried to convince themselves to let go completely, only to find that their thoughts had returned to you before the night was finished. Moments when they made a deliberate effort to sever the emotional thread, only to find it stronger afterward rather than weaker. Every attempt to escape the bond only sharpened their awareness of how real it was, rather than diminishing it. This happens because what existed between you was never operating on a surface level. Something in them genuinely recognized something real in you. That kind of recognition does not dissolve because someone decides to ignore it. It stays and it continues shaping their inner world in quiet and persistent ways. That shift has also changed how they sense your energetic presence. Even across distance, they can feel that you are no longer emotionally reaching for them the way you once did. They notice that you have become more settled within yourself, less anxious about the outcome, less dependent on their responses to regulate how you feel. Strangely, that independence, that sense of you being genuinely whole within yourself, is exactly what has made their awareness of you even more intense. When someone stops chasing and fully returns to themselves, their energy becomes calmer and more concentrated. And that calm creates a kind of space in which the other person is left alone with the full weight of their feelings without the usual distractions to buffer them from the truth. In that stillness, their thoughts keep returning to the connection again and again. They can no longer remain comfortably detached from the emotional reality of what you mean to them. It is becoming genuinely impossible to deny that you have affected them in a way that fundamentally changed how they experience closeness and emotional depth with another person. That kind of realization is deeply unsettling for someone who has relied on staying in control for so long, because once you genuinely understand how much another person means to you, you are also forced to face vulnerability, the possibility of being fully open and the risk of being hurt. Fear has guided so many of this person's choices across such a long stretch of time. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of being completely seen by someone and then abandoned in the most exposed moment. But fear always meets its own limit eventually. The weight of continuing to avoid the truth becomes heavier than the weight of honestly facing it. And that is the stage they are slowly but unmistakably approaching now. The silence between you has stopped feeling like empty space to them. It has become emotionally loud in a way they cannot turn down or step away from. Every day of disconnection increases the internal pressure. Every attempt to push the feelings further down only amplifies them rather than quieting them. This is why the energetic shifts you may have been picking up feel so significant. Something inside them is genuinely preparing for change. Not a change that is being forced or manufactured, but a natural, emotional awakening that slowly transforms how a person understands love, connection, and the truth of their own inner life. They are beginning to understand that losing you would not simply mean losing a person from their life. It would mean losing a part of themselves that only came into existence through this specific connection. That kind of awareness creates the conditions for deep internal transformation, whether or not any of it has been expressed outwardly yet. And yet, despite everything, their heart is moving toward a point where silence can no longer remain in charge of the situation. The more they try to create emotional distance, the more clearly your absence makes itself felt. This creates a real internal conflict between the desire to stay protected and behind walls and the growing desire to reconnect honestly. They imagine conversations they have not yet had. They replay possible outcomes and wonder what would happen if they reached out and whether too much time has already made that impossible. These thoughts are growing stronger with each day that passes. What once felt manageable to avoid now feels genuinely urgent and emotionally heavy. There are moments when they come very close to actually reaching out, when the internal pressure builds to a point where the silence almost breaks entirely on its own. But fear moves in at the last moment and holds them still. Fear has functioned as their primary defense for so long that its reflexes are deeply established. But even fear is losing its power over them now. Day by day, emotional truth is becoming heavier than the old protective patterns that once kept everything at bay. The part of them that worked to stay distant and contained is beginning to weaken under the accumulated weight of what they can no longer deny. And beneath all of the resistance, they already know the truth at a level that cannot be argued with. No one else has reached them the way you did. No other connection has created that same quality of emotional recognition, of depth, of genuine understanding that did not require constant explanation. That awareness has quietly changed everything in their inner world. What once felt uncertain now carries real significance. What they once worked to avoid now feels impossible to fully escape from. What they once questioned is growing clearer with every day that passes. Clarity naturally creates movement. Emotional growth does not always happen in visible and measurable steps, but something fundamentally important is shifting within them. There are still fears to confront, old habits to dismantle, and honest truths to accept about themselves and about the choices they made. But something essential has already changed. They are no longer standing outside this feeling, trying to decide from a safe distance whether they are willing to enter it. They are already inside it, experiencing it fully, whether they have admitted that to anyone else or not. And once someone reaches that point, maintaining silence becomes exponentially harder. Both of you have grown through the distance between you. The imbalance that once defined the dynamic cannot remain intact. Something more honest is beginning to emerge from beneath everything that was built on avoidance. All of the silence, all of the reflection, and all of the internal pressure have created conditions where emotional movement is no longer avoidable. Real truth cannot stay buried indefinitely before it finds a way to express itself. Something inside them has reached a point where holding everything in is no longer sustainable. The silence that once felt like protection has begun working against them. The distance they created to preserve their sense of safety now feels lonelier than honesty could ever feel. This is the final stage before change begins showing itself in visible ways. For a long time, they genuinely believed that avoidance would cause the connection to fade and become manageable. They believed that emotional withdrawal and deliberate distance would gradually weaken the intensity of what they felt. But every attempt to disconnect has only shown them more clearly how deeply rooted this bond truly is. You have changed something in them in a way that is lasting. Once someone genuinely understands that another person has permanently shifted how they experience love and emotional closeness, they cannot simply return to who they were before that encounter. This becomes a true awakening. They begin to understand that the peace they kept searching for was never located in running. It was always waiting in the honest acceptance of what they actually feel. There are moments now when they feel extremely close to reaching out, when the internal pressure becomes so intense that the silence nearly breaks completely. They imagine conversations, consider possible outcomes, think through the possibilities as fear slowly loses its grip on their choices. Even though hesitation still exists alongside all of this, a genuine and irreversible shift is unfolding beneath everything. This connection is moving toward a significant turning point in the direction of emotional honesty. The truth living inside them has become too strong to suppress indefinitely. And yet the most important realization in all of this has always been about you coming to understand your own worth so deeply and so genuinely that no amount of silence could reduce it. The moment you stopped chasing, the moment you stopped making yourself smaller and returned to your own peace and your own center, the entire dynamic changed. It forced this person to experience your absence in a more honest way than they ever had before, to feel the weight of it rather than relying on your continued availability to buffer them from what they truly felt. What is happening between you right now is real. Trust what you are sensing beneath the surface of the silence. You are not imagining it, and you are not manufacturing it out of hope. Both of you are standing at the edge of something true. One of you is learning, perhaps for the first time in a serious and lasting way, to stop running from what they genuinely feel. The other is learning how to love without disappearing into that love, how to hold care for another person without abandoning the care you hold for yourself. And whatever unfolds next, whatever direction this takes and whatever form it arrives in, carry this understanding with you. You are already becoming whole. Not because someone finally chooses to step toward you. Not because silence ends on some predetermined schedule. Not because every unanswered question suddenly receives an answer, but because you made the choice to stop abandoning yourself while pouring everything you had into someone who was not yet ready to meet you. That kind of healing is not small. It changes the quality of everything that comes after it. It changes how you receive love when it arrives honestly. It changes how you recognize the difference between someone who is genuinely available and someone who is still hiding from their own feelings. It changes what you are willing to accept and what you quietly and firmly decline to settle for anymore. Sometimes the quiet that exists just before something meaningful finally happens is precisely where the most significant inner growth takes place, in both people, not loudly, not with announcements or declarations, but beneath the surface, steadily and without pause, in the place where real things begin before they ever become visible in the world.